Hey everybody, it's Daddy Warlock, your punk monk, Dr. John Michael Salvato, and welcome to another installment of Inner Alchemy, the science of spiritual living. On today's show, we're going to continue to explore that concept that we started yesterday, the concept of magical thinking as a means of liberating ourselves from the distractions that steal precious time from our magical practice and our passions and from the craft itself. At the foundation of practical magic, witchcraft, and other magical arts lies an understanding of some of the ancient principles of Hermeticism and alchemy. And today we're going to unpack the first of those seven principles as found in the Kybalion when we come back. So stay tuned. And we are back. Be sure to like and subscribe and comment whether you're able to catch these broadcasts live or on the replay. Your comments and questions and your input are always very welcome. Now, I'm not quite sure, since I don't chew gum and talk well at the same time, that I'm going to be able to watch the comments and watch the PowerPoint today, because this is the first time I'm doing that on this platform. So it might be a complete disaster, but we will give it our best shot. And I'll try to respond to everyone in the comments when the show is over as well. So let's get started. And if you're ready for me to drop some wisdom and insight into the first principle of Hermeticism and magical thinking, type in the comments, "Show me the magic," and we'll be ready to dive in. So I've got to see how I do this. All right. That should be easy enough. All right, so today, like I said, we're going to talk about the seven Hermetic principles. Part one is the principle of mentalism. Now, when we say mentalism, we're talking about the stuff of the universe, that subatomic stuff that the universe is made of. Einstein called that the 0 point. At the quantum level, we can adopt a framework of reference to explain the existence of the phenomenal and noumenal worlds. And so this is what we're talking about when we say the universal mind. Within the Kybalion, we first read that all substantial reality, that is to say the outward manifestations, phenomena, and appearances that we talk about when we talk about this mental universe, is comprised of the same stuff. It's comprised of the same spirit or ethos. The word for that in Hebrew was ruach, breath. Now this ruach, this breath, is described as unknowable, as undefinable. It was neither created nor can be destroyed, and it's referred to in the ancient text as universal, infinite, living mind. Now let's think about that for a minute. In the postmodern world, what is it that we refer to when we talk about something which can neither be created nor destroyed, but simply changes form? You might have to think back a little bit to your high school days, but go ahead, if you know the answer to that, go ahead and drop it in the comments. What is it that we refer to when we say something that can neither be created nor destroyed, which simply changes form? See, the universal mind tells us that the idea of empty space that can have an intrinsic energy associated with it, and that there's no such thing as a true vacuum. So as you recall from science, that idea is energy, that concept of something which is neither created nor destroyed, something which only changes form. And so if there is an energy that exists even in what we think of as a vacuum, then that's the idea that led to Einstein's reference to this unquantifiable, vast reservoir of dark energy below the atomic level, which he called 0 point energy. Now, 0 point energy can best be described as that vast reservoir of dark matter from which all manifest phenomenon is created. It's the mother of all atomic structure. It's the birther of the cosmos. Now, the Kybalion says that the universe is simply a mental creation which exists in the universal mind. Now, what does that tell us? That tells us that the Kabbalion, the ancients, are saying that the universe is a thought. Okay, so think about that. If this universal mind has existed and cannot be created, cannot be destroyed, only changes form, and that universal mind is the same thing we think of as energy, and the universe itself is a thought, then we have some parallels to draw on in the late 18th and 19th centuries. The New Thought movement is a movement that began really in its rudimentary form in the late 1800s, but really began to become more public in the 19th century, and is considered to have been derived from the writings that were unpublished at the time of Phineas Quimby. Now, Quimby learned about the power of the mind to heal through studying hypnosis, as he observed a guy by the name of Charles Poyen, who was working with folks who had illnesses that were able to be healed on an individual basis using hypnosis. And in some of his early letters, we actually find that in the late 18th century, despite the little temper tantrum that some of you might have seen a friend of ours, throw when I questioned the idea that New Thought was purely something in the mid 19th century that came about. Quimby was talking about this and writing about this in the late 18th century, I believe. I know that certainly Dr. or Judge Thomas Troward was talking about this too as he was preparing to retire in the late 1800s. And one of the other great sources that we have is an individual by the name of Neville Goddard. Now, Neville Goddard was a teacher of New Thought later on who challenged the belief that the Bible was based on historical fact. And that was pretty revolutionary for his time. He taught that manifesting desires was possible through a principle that he referred to as affirmative prayer. That essentially the scriptures that were handed down from the 70 some authors that often seemed contradictory were just perspectives that people had on how to use this universal mind to create a better life. Now we see that same theme continuing in later years as Dr. Ernest Holmes, author of The Science of Mind, created a 5-step process for intentional creation, and that process is known as spiritual mind treatment. You guys might remember on one of our episodes of The Brew in our last season, we had Dr. Terry Drew Karanen on the show, and as well as Casey Jovinko, and we were talking about spiritual mind treatment as a means of sort of a secular means of doing the same thing that witches do in changing the energy around a certain person, a certain circumstance, a certain condition to bend it to our will. Now, in the ancient and unnamed path, if we examine this idea more closely, it should resonate with practitioners of witchcraft and magic, alchemy, and the other esoteric practices, because the process of conscious creation or manifestation of phenomenon was known to be among the most fundamental aspects of mastery within the craft of the wise. And that's why we're talking about that and diving into these 7 principles as we explore this idea of magical thinking, so that one can reclaim sort of the control of their experiences and their universe. So in magical thinking, in magical terms, we talk about spells and incantations. This is really the same thing that we're talking about when we talk about spiritual mind treatment. An incantation is a magical formula intended to trigger a magical effect on a person or a situation, circumstances, or an object. The formula can be spoken, it can be sung, it can be chanted, or it can be spoken internally. An incantation can be performed during ritual magic, during ceremonial rituals or prayers, and it can be done privately. So other words for incantations or spells are charms, esoteric commands. So these are ideas that we speak into the universe. But let's talk a little bit about what precedes that speech. See, before you or I can speak a word, we have to think. We have to set our intention. And what are we doing when we set our intention? We're giving energy to the words that we're about to speak. This is something that witches and magical practitioners, sorcerers, and practitioners of other magical arts do mindfully. And quite often, it comes natural. We don't even have to think about it in order to give our intention, to give our energy to that thought. So whether you were initiated into a particular tradition, or you learned the craft from your hereditary elders, picked up a book, or intuitively began to practice, you were harnessing the power of words born from intentionality, born from thought. Every single time you cast a spell, every single time you worked a ritual or offered a prayer. So as we are celebrating today, the great feast of Hecate, the mother of all witches, then we can, and queen of all witches, we can offer rituals, offer prayers, offer spell work. But all of that is about setting our intention, bringing focus to our energy, to our mental energy, so that we can create the desired results of that prayer, of that offering. So what if the ancient texts from a multitude of traditions going back as many as 5,000 years got it right? What if the phenomenal and noumenal universes were entirely made up of a single, unquantifiable dark matter, as Einstein observed, and that dark matter was what the New Thought teachers called thought, and the Kabbalion refers to as the universal mind? What if the secret to a fruitful and rich practice of the craft wasn't the nonsensical, ego-driven fanboy, fangirl bullshit that we hear about lineage and heredity and all of the other bullshit that we derive from television and fictional stories, myths and legends, but instead that secret was just to shut up, to go to work on mastering our minds, learning the intrinsic synergy between the cycle of the seasons and the experiences of life, cultivating wisdom from calm abiding, and knowing that our thoughts create our experiences. What if we took back the responsibility and the control of what we experience in life, recognizing that we create that? Now, I know a lot of people have problems with that. In fact, we've seen some of the criticisms and misunderstandings, misrepresentations actually, that have occurred as people discuss Marianne Williamson's candidacy for the presidency. You see, there are certain gay magazines and other media that said that Marianne Williamson told gay people that if they're sick, that it's their fault. That all disease starts in the mind, and therefore, if you have AIDS, it's your fault. If kids have autism, that it's because their parents didn't think the right things and had those kids inoculated or given vaccines. But I've known her for at least 20 some years, and I can tell you that that's often a misconstrued teaching. And it's not that she's without blame. It's not that those who misconstrue it are without blame. But let's set blame aside. The teaching is that all disease and all experience itself begins in thought. So if we say that everything that we experience begins in thought, if we believe that the universe itself is a thought, then it's important that we recognize that we don't get to pick and choose. This isn't like the traditional Catholic theology where they pick and choose from the catechism what works for them and ignore the rest. You see people all the time who talk about what tremendous pro-life advocates they are, who ignore the children that are in cages on our border. You see, you can't be pro-life and not care about the kids on the border. You can't be pro-life and not care about the trans persons that are being murdered as they're waiting for the bus. So when we talk about the universal mind and we talk about the principle of mentalism, then this must apply always and everywhere. And therefore, illnesses begin in thought. Now, that doesn't mean that all you have to do, as some people have suggested, is change your thinking and the illness goes away. You see, that's where we get into this toxic positivity that has plagued the New Age movement and has plagued even the New Thought movement in recent years, as people begin illness shaming those folks who are experiencing difficult times in their lives. That's not what we're talking about. If something begins in thought, that sets off a series of circumstances, what we call causes and conditions in Buddhism. Those causes and conditions manifest then in the physical world. They manifest in the physical body. So once something has manifest in the physical world, we also have to give it a physical approach. See, it's not enough to say that our thoughts have created imbalances in our bodies, and those imbalances result in everything from neurological disorders to sleep disorders to depression to endocrine disorders to weight problems. You don't just change the thought. You change the thought so that your future will begin to manifest more healthy, but you have to take action. It's about 100% responsibility, not 50%. So in the physical world, we take responsibility. Now, part of that is the mental process, and we call that sifting through the chaotic data. So there's an expression that chaos magicians rely on that says, out of chaos comes regeneration. The birth of new ideas and the mastery of our innate power has never depended on our heredity. It's never depended on hierarchy or religious superstition, period, costume, lineage, or traditions of origin. And understand, I'm not condemning any of those things. There is a place for heredity and the ancestors, hierarchy, religious superstition for those who choose to follow a religious path, period, costume, and lineage, and origins of your origin myth for your particular traditions. And you have a right to embrace whatever that might be, whether it's true or not, whether it's based on fact or not. But your birthright is the exact same as mine and every other being on the planet, both animate and inanimate. You have the birthright to recognize your true nature, and your only and sole nature is as pure awareness. And so if we're pure awareness, that means that we can sift through the chaotic data to find our true selves. And until we master that first principle of Hermetics, then we're not really practicing magic. We may be practicing ritual magic. We may be part of that religion that often gets confused with magic, that often gets confused with witchcraft or sorcery or any of the other esoteric traditions. When we talk about covens and we talk about Wicca and we talk about initiations, those are all things of the religion which was created in the 20th century, that is based on a misunderstanding, a misrepresentation of the relationship that witches and sorcerers and mages had to the religious cult, the cult of Diana, the cult of Hecate, the cult of Lucifer, or Dionysus. That was a religion. And yes, in those celebrations, those covens, there were witches. There were also bakers. There were also shoemakers and dressmakers. There were probably hairdressers at some point. It was a gathering of the community to worship and show devotion to the divine in any of its manifestations. Now, in that group, there may have been witches, but the witches themselves, the practice of the ancient and unnamed path, the crooked path of the wise, was not really related to the practice of that religion. It was related to the mastery of the principles of Hermetics. It was related to understanding that the passing down of wisdom, or the innate self-initiation that comes from recognizing that you are the author of your life. You are the one holding the pen. So what do we do with this information? As I said, this principle of mentalism, understanding that everything is thought, everything around you, everything that's coming, everything that's happened. Well, the first thing you can do with it is recognize that if everything is thought, then your past has no more impact on you than you give it, because it's just a thought, and our thoughts can change. And worrying about your future, Same thing. So what I would recommend that you do with this information as we continue to unpack these ideas is rely on the message, not on the teacher's personality. Rely on the meaning, not just on the words. Rely on the deeper meaning, not on the provisional one. And rely on your wisdom mind, not your ordinary judgmental mind. These are our principles, 4 principles that were taught by the Buddha, that I think can be applied to everything that we're learning on a daily basis, everything we talk about on this show. And I think that it can really be useful. And I want you guys to ask questions, not just of me, but ask questions of the universe around you, and then stop, take time to listen. Because when we listen, when we still ourselves, when we bring ourselves back to this moment, that's where the power is. When we fill that moment with gratitude and awareness, we begin to recognize our innate self, that pure awareness. Then that opens the door for abundance to pour in, abundance of wisdom, abundance of healing, abundance of solutions to the problems that we face. And that allows us to remember that the best is yet to come. I want to thank our sponsor for today's program, the Mental Wellness Movement, helping men and women to reclaim the path to a healthier mind, body, and spirit. For more information and a free mental wellness assessment, you can get more information at mentalwellnessmovement.org. And until next time, this is Dr. John Michael Salvato